Stop reaching for your usual morning coffee first thing if you're over 60 and you've noticed that your legs feel heavy, cold, or achy after just a few minutes of walking. I know that sounds insane coming from a vascular surgeon, but here's what nobody in a white coat has told you. The standard advice to just walk more and cut back on salt completely ignores the one mechanism that's actually starving your leg muscles of blood after age 60, and it's a mechanism most primary care visits simply don't have time to explain. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what to drink instead, based on real clinical trials from real universities, not internet myths. Let's start with the single number that should genuinely alarm every person watching this video right now. A study out of the University of Nebraska Medical Center published in the American Journal of Physiology found that a single moderate dose of a specific plant-based drink significantly improved walking distance and blood vessel function in patients with compromised leg circulation, in some cases within hours, not months, not weeks. Hours in some documented cases. Separately, a 12-week clinical trial found that combining this same drink with exercise increased pain-free walking time by nearly 3 minutes and extended walking distance by over 50 meters compared to a placebo group. I'll tell you exactly what that drink is when we hit number 1, and trust me, it is not what most health channels are telling you to buy. And the reason it works so well specifically for older adults is backed by hard data, not guesswork. Before we go any further, I want to know who's actually watching this. Drop your age in the comments right now and tell me this. Do your legs feel worse in the morning when you first stand up or later in the day after you've been on your feet? I read every single comment on these videos, and that answer tells me more about what's happening in your circulation than almost anything else you could tell me. So take 10 seconds, type it in, and then let's get into it, because what you tell me shapes the videos I make next. Here's the piece of anatomy nobody explains to patients. Your legs are about as far from your heart as blood has to travel, and by the time you're past 60, the small blood vessels feeding your calf and thigh muscles, what we call the microvasculature, have lost a significant portion of their ability to dilate or widen on demand. Some research estimates that by age 70, the artery's ability to relax and expand can decline by 30% or more compared to a person in their 30s. Think of your blood vessels like a garden hose that's been left out in the sun for 20 years. It still carries water, but it's stiffer, less flexible, and it can't suddenly widen to deliver a big gush when your muscles need it. That stiffness is called endothelial dysfunction, and it is the single biggest reason your legs feel tired, heavy, cold, or crampy compared to 20 years ago. On top of that stiffness, there's a second problem layering on top of it, something researchers call inflammaging, a slow, low-grade simmer of inflammation that builds up in the walls of your blood vessels over decades. It doesn't hurt the way an injury hurts, so you don't notice it happening, but it does two damaging things at once. It makes the lining of your arteries, called the endothelium, less able to produce nitric oxide on its own, and it makes red and white blood cells more likely to stick to artery walls instead of flowing smoothly past them. A little like debris slowly narrowing a river channel. Combine reduced flexibility with this sticky, inflamed lining, and you get exactly what so many of you are experiencing. Legs that feel heavy after standing at the sink for 10 minutes, feet that go cold before the rest of your body, or that dull ache that shows up the moment you try to walk any real distance. The good news is that this is not a one-way street. Certain compounds found naturally in food and drink can restore some of that flexibility and calm that inflammation, sometimes in a matter of hours, not months or years. That's what this whole list is built around, 5 specific drinks, each with real clinical trials behind them, each working through a slightly different mechanism to get blood moving back into your legs. We're counting down from 5 to 1, least powerful to most powerful, based on the actual clinical evidence behind each one. Stick around, because number 1 is the one almost nobody talks about. It comes with a specific timing trick most people get completely wrong, and the research behind it found something that genuinely surprised me the first time I read it. Number 5 is Hibiscus Tea, and I want to start here because it's the gentlest option on this list, but the data behind it is more serious than people realize. Researchers at Tufts University ran a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial in 65 adults with elevated blood pressure. Half the group drank 3 cups of brewed hibiscus tea daily for 6 weeks, and the other half drank a placebo beverage that looked and tasted similar. At the end of 6 weeks, the hibiscus group saw their systolic blood pressure, that's the top number, drop by an average of about 7 points more than the placebo group, and people who started with the highest blood pressure saw the biggest improvements. A separate meta-analysis pooling multiple trials found reductions in the same range, confirming this wasn't a fluke. Here's why that matters specifically for leg circulation in an aging body. When you're over 60, your blood vessels are dealing with two compounding problems at once: chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, and reduced elasticity in the vessel walls. Hibiscus is loaded with anthocyanins, the same deep red pigments that give it its color, and these compounds act like a gentle anti-inflammatory wash for the inside lining of your arteries. Less inflammation means your blood vessels aren't in a constant state of low-grade constriction, so blood has an easier path down into your calves and feet. For preparation, steep 2 to 3 teaspoons of dried hibiscus calyces or 1 hibiscus tea bag in hot water for about 10 minutes. The longer steep time actually pulls more of those anthocyanins out. The trial that produced those results used 3 servings a day, so if you're serious about seeing similar numbers, 1 cup in the morning, 1 at lunch, and 1 mid-afternoon is a reasonable way to mirror that protocol without overdoing the caffeine, since hibiscus itself is naturally caffeine-free. Drink it in the morning or early afternoon, since it has a mild diuretic effect and you don't want to be up at 2 a.m. because of it. For a synergy tip, add a squeeze of fresh lemon. The vitamin C in the lemon helps stabilize those anthocyanins, so more of them survive your digestive system and actually reach your bloodstream, rather than breaking down before they ever get the chance to work on your arteries. One quick caution: if you're on blood pressure medication already, especially anything in the ACE inhibitor family, talk to your doctor before adding daily hibiscus tea, since the two together can occasionally lower blood pressure more than either one alone. I had a patient, Dolores, 66, from a small town outside Sacramento, who started drinking hibiscus tea every morning after her checkup showed borderline high blood pressure. 8 weeks later, she told me her ankles weren't swelling by dinner time anymore, something she'd just accepted as getting older for the past 5 years, and her follow-up numbers backed up exactly what she was feeling. Number 4 is pomegranate juice, and this one has some of the most striking numbers in this entire list. In a landmark study, researchers found that patients who drank pomegranate juice daily for just 2 weeks experienced a 36% increase in nitric oxide activity and a 21% drop in systolic blood pressure. Nitric oxide, if you're not familiar, is the tiny gas molecule your blood vessels use to signal relax and widen to the muscle tissue surrounding them. More recent systematic reviews and meta-analyses of pomegranate trials have confirmed consistent improvements in markers of vascular inflammation, including a measurable reduction in a molecule called ICAM1, which is essentially a stickiness marker that makes blood cells clump to artery walls instead of flowing smoothly. Why does this matter more as you age? After 60, your body's natural production of nitric oxide through an enzyme called ENOS starts to decline, partly due to accumulated oxidative stress. Think of oxidative stress as rust slowly building up inside your pipes from decades of normal wear. Pomegranate is rich in a class of compounds called L-agglutannins, which your gut bacteria convert into smaller molecules called urolithins. These urolithins don't just add more nitric oxide, they actually protect the nitric oxide you already have from being destroyed by that oxidative rust, so more of it survives long enough to reach the small vessels in your legs and tell them to open up. For preparation, look for 100% pomegranate juice with no added sugar. About 8 ounces a day is the dose used in most of these trials. Check the ingredient label carefully. A lot of what's sold as pomegranate juice on grocery shelves is actually a blend heavily diluted with apple or grape juice, and you want the real thing to get anywhere close to the polyphenol content used in the research. If straight juice is too intense for your taste or your blood sugar concerns, diluting it with sparkling water still preserves most of the polyphenols, while cutting the sugar load roughly in half. Drink it with a meal that contains a little healthy fat, like a handful of walnuts, because some of pomegranate's protective compounds are fat-soluble and are better absorbed alongside a source of dietary fat, similar to how you'd want to eat tomatoes with olive oil to properly absorb lycopene. That's your synergy pairing. I think of Frank, 74, from a suburb outside Dallas, who added pomegranate juice to his breakfast after his cardiologist flagged some early arterial stiffness on a routine scan. At his 6-month follow-up, his numbers had genuinely improved, and he told me he'd started taking the dog on longer walks again without the burning sensation he used to get in his calves halfway around the block. Now, before we get to the top 3, and trust me, these next 3 are where the real transformation happens, including the one I'd argue almost nobody in mainstream medicine is talking about. I need you to do 2 quick things. Hit that subscribe button and tap the like button on this video. I say this every single time because it genuinely determines whether YouTube shows these videos to other people your age who need this information just as badly as you do. People who might be sitting at home right now assuming heavy, aching legs are just something they have to live with. It costs you nothing, and it takes 2 seconds, and it makes a real difference in whether this channel can keep doing this kind of research-backed work. Now let's get into number 3. Number 3 is a flavanol-rich cocoa drink. And I know what you're thinking. This sounds too good to be true. Chocolate helping your legs. But researchers at the University of Nottingham studied 12 healthy older adults with an average age of 72 and found that a single dose of 450 to 500 milligrams of cocoa flavanols significantly increased microvascular blood volume in the leg muscle itself, measured directly with ultrasound at both the 180 and 240-minute marks after consumption. A separate study out of the University of Birmingham found that cocoa flavanols helped counteract the blood flow reduction that happens in older adults after prolonged sitting, which is enormously relevant if you spend a lot of your day in a chair. Here's the aging-specific mechanism at play. As we get older, our muscles develop something researchers call anabolic resistance, which means your muscle tissue becomes less responsive to the nutrients and oxygen delivered by your blood even when the blood is flowing. Cocoa flavanols appear to work on 2 fronts simultaneously. They stimulate nitric oxide production to widen the vessels, and they also support mitochondrial function. And remember, mitochondria are the tiny energy factories inside every muscle cell. When those factories are running efficiently, your leg muscles can actually use the extra oxygen and glucose that improved blood flow delivers, instead of that blood flow going to waste. For preparation, you want a genuinely flavanol-rich cocoa powder, not standard hot chocolate mix, which is often processed with alkali, a technique called Dutching, in a way that strips out most of the beneficial compounds along with much of the natural bitterness. Look for non-alkalized or natural cocoa powder on the label. Mix about 1 to 2 tablespoons into hot water or unsweetened almond milk, and drink it roughly 2 to 3 hours before you plan to be active, since that's when blood flow improvements peaked in the research, right around the 180 to 240-minute mark after consumption. For your synergy tip, pair it with a small amount of cinnamon, which has its own modest circulation-supporting properties and also happens to make the drink taste considerably better without needing added sugar, which would otherwise work against the very inflammation you're trying to calm. I had a patient named Ruth, 69, from just outside Pittsburgh, who started an afternoon cocoa ritual about 2 hours before her daily walk. Within a month, she said her legs no longer felt like they were dragging cinder blocks by the second lap around her neighborhood, and she'd added an entire extra lap to her route without meaning to. Number 2 is watermelon juice, specifically for its L-citrulline content, and this is the one where the science genuinely surprised the researchers themselves. Studies out of Florida State University found that when adults consumed 6 grams of L-citrulline sourced from watermelon extract daily for 6 weeks, they saw measurable improvements in arterial function and a real drop in aortic blood pressure. More targeted research on the legs specifically found that watermelon juice improved lower limb arterial stiffness and increased blood flow through the posterior tibial artery, one of the main arteries feeding blood down into your foot, in a matter of hours after a single serving. Why watermelon and not just any fruit juice? L-citrulline is an amino acid that your kidneys convert into another amino acid called L-arginine, and L-arginine is the direct raw material your body uses to manufacture nitric oxide. Here's the analogy I give my patients. If nitric oxide is the delivery truck's engine, arginine is the fuel, and citrulline is like a fuel reserve tank that keeps refilling the main tank steadily over time, rather than dumping it all in at once and running dry. That steady refill matters enormously for older bodies because direct arginine supplementation tends to get broken down too quickly in the gut before it ever reaches your bloodstream, while citrulline sails through digestion, largely untouched, and gets converted where it's actually needed. For preparation, fresh pressed watermelon juice is ideal. Aim for roughly 2 cups and don't strain out all the white rind if you can help it, since a meaningful amount of citrulline actually concentrates in the rind, right where most people throw it away. If fresh watermelon isn't in season or you're not in the mood to juice a melon every week, a quality L-citrulline supplement in the 4 to 6 gram range mimics the dosing used in the research fairly closely. Timing matters here. Drink it about 1 to 2 hours before your daily walk or any leg exercise, so the citrulline to arginine conversion has time to peak right when your muscles need the extra blood flow most, rather than after the fact when the walk is already over. For a synergy pairing, a small amount of vitamin C, even just adding some fresh strawberries alongside your watermelon, helps protect the nitric oxide pathway from oxidative breakdown, the same rust prevention concept we talked about earlier with pomegranate. Margaret, 71, from Central Ohio, came to me after years of what she called restless, achy legs every single night, the kind of ache that would wake her up needing to shake her feet out from under the covers. We added a watermelon juice habit before her evening walks, and within 6 weeks she told me, almost in disbelief, that she'd slept through an entire night without waking up to deal with that ache for the first time in years. And now, number 1, the most powerful option on this entire list, and the one backed by the deepest body of clinical research specifically in patients with real diagnosed circulation problems in their legs. It's beetroot juice, and here's why it earns the top spot without question. Researchers at the University of Nebraska Medical Center found that a moderate body weight calibrated dose of beetroot juice significantly improved both blood vessel function and maximal walking distance in patients with peripheral artery disease, a condition where arteries in the legs are narrowed and blood flow is compromised. In a separate 12-week randomized trial, patients who combined beetroot juice with a walking program saw their pain-free walking time before cramping increased by about 3 minutes, and their 6-minute walking distance improved by over 50 meters, both significantly outperforming the placebo group. Perhaps most remarkably, one study specifically comparing younger and older adults found that older adults actually experienced a greater blood pressure lowering and blood flow improving response to beetroot juice than younger participants did, meaning this is one of the rare interventions that works better the older you are. Here's the why behind the why. Beetroot is one of the most concentrated natural sources of dietary nitrate on the planet. When you swallow that nitrate, bacteria living on the back of your tongue, yes, your tongue has its own little ecosystem, converted into nitrite, which your bloodstream then converts into nitric oxide precisely in the low oxygen environments where you need it most, like a working leg muscle during a walk. This is actually a completely separate pathway from the one your endothelium normally uses to make nitric oxide, which is enormously important because that primary pathway is exactly the one that weakens with age. Beetroot essentially opens up a backup delivery route straight to your leg muscles, bypassing the machinery that's worn down over the decades. Researchers have also found that this pathway directly supports mitochondrial efficiency in the muscle itself, meaning your leg muscles aren't just getting more blood, they're using the oxygen in that blood more effectively once it arrives, which is exactly what combats that anabolic resistance we talked about earlier. For preparation and dosing, the research generally used around 300 to 500 milliliters of beetroot juice, or roughly 1 to 2 cups, either as a single dose about 2 to 3 hours before activity, or split into smaller amounts across the day if straight beetroot juice is too intense for your palate or your blood pressure is already on the low side. If you're making it fresh, juice raw beets with the greens still attached if possible, since nitrate concentrations are actually highest closer to the leaves, and don't peel the beets too aggressively, since a fair amount of the nitrate sits just under the skin. One important note, and this one surprises almost everyone. Avoid using antibacterial mouthwash right before or after drinking it, since it kills the exact tongue bacteria responsible for converting that nitrate into something usable. It's an easy mistake. Plenty of well-meaning people rinse with mouthwash right after a glass of beetroot juice and unknowingly cancel out most of the benefit before it even has a chance to work. For your synergy pairing, a small amount of vitamin C-rich fruit, like an orange or a handful of berries, helps stabilize the nitrite conversion process and can meaningfully boost how much usable nitric oxide you end up producing, essentially protecting the delivery truck's fuel from spoiling before it reaches its destination. I want to tell you about Walter, 77, from a small farming community in Iowa. When he first came to my clinic, he could barely make it to his mailbox and back without stopping twice, his calves cramping so severely he had to sit on his porch steps to recover before finishing the short walk back inside. He'd been told by more than one doctor that this was simply what happens with age, that he should expect his walking distance to keep shrinking, and he'd more or less made peace with it. We started him on a modest beetroot juice routine timed before his short daily walks, alongside a gentle, gradually increasing walking program, closely mirroring the exact protocol used in that Nebraska trial. The first few weeks were unremarkable, honestly, and he almost gave up on it. But by week 8, he noticed he could make it to the mailbox without stopping at all. 4 months later, Walter walked into my office, no cane, no stopping, and told me he'd just gotten back from a full loop around his property, something he hadn't done in 3 years. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Doc, I thought this was just what old age felt like. Nobody told me I could get some of this back." And that, honestly, is the whole point of this video. So many of you have quietly accepted heavy, aching, cold legs as an inevitable part of getting older, something you're just supposed to live with because that's what happened to your parents or what your friends complain about at every lunch. But I want you to sit with something for a second. Independence is not one big dramatic thing. It's made up of 1,000 small physical acts you probably don't think twice about when they're easy. Walking to your own mailbox, getting up from a chair without bracing yourself against the armrest, standing at the stove long enough to finish cooking a real meal, following your grandchild around a backyard instead of watching from a lawn chair. Every one of those small acts depends on blood actually reaching your leg muscles when you ask it to, and every one of those small acts is quietly at stake when circulation starts to decline. That's why I don't take it lightly when a patient tells me they've stopped doing something they used to love because their legs just can't handle it anymore. Because in my experience, more often than people expect, that's not a fixed, unchangeable fact about aging. It's a solvable problem, and it's one you have far more control over than you've probably been told. Your independence, your ability to walk to your car, chase after a grandchild, garden for an afternoon, or simply get up in the morning without wincing, that is worth fighting for. And it is genuinely never too late to start giving your circulatory system the specific support it needs. Whether that's a cup of hibiscus tea in the morning, a square of dark cocoa in the afternoon, or a glass of beetroot juice before your evening walk. Small, consistent choices, backed by real research, not fads, not miracle claims, can meaningfully change how your legs feel and how far you can go on them, at 65, at 75, even at 85. All the studies I referenced today, the Nebraska trials, the Tufts Hibiscus study, the Pomegranate meta-analyses, the Nottingham and Birmingham cocoa research, and the Florida State watermelon studies are linked in the description below so you can read them yourself and bring them to your own doctor if you'd like. And honestly, I encourage you to. One quick reminder before you go, none of this replaces a proper evaluation. If you're having genuine leg pain, numbness, or wounds that won't heal, those symptoms deserve a real exam, not just a change in your morning beverage. But for the everyday heaviness, the achiness, the legs that just don't feel like they used to, these 5 drinks give you a genuine, evidence-based place to start. If this video helped you understand what's actually happening in your legs, do me a favor and subscribe, because I put out new videos like this every single week, built entirely on real clinical research, not internet trends. And before you go, I want to know in the comments, which one of these 5 are you going to try first? And how long has it been since you could walk without your legs slowing you down? I'll be reading every answer, and I mean that. Take care of those legs of yours. They've carried you this far, and with the right support, they can absolutely carry you a lot further.